You're listening to the official Reformed Stoic podcast, covering politics, philosophy, theology, conspiracy theories. I'm ready to get to the bottom of this life. Are you? Join Wolfgang, Sketty Squad, Purity Gang, as we strive to take dominion over this dying planet. I am Reformed Stoic, and this is my podcast. You know I'm glugging it, thugging it, wrinkles and rugging it, no more chat on the screen, if y'all know what I mean. Smoking on that bean. Call me Jack. My tobacco stays whack. No, it ain't an act. Holla back. Skid it. I'm gonna plug this laptop in. Woo! How we doing, brother? Let's go, brothers! Mic check, mic check. Looking good. Oh no, the chat's not on the screen. I'm trying to think. All these like equations are flying through my mind. It's like, how do I get the chat back on the screen? It doesn't really matter, dude. It was kind of cool, but we barely even use this screen anyway. Let's move on. A little bit of Crinkler drama before the stream started. She's doing good now. She just kind of got her little footy all wrapped up in the microphone cord. She never actually got hurt, but she kind of like panicked because she was getting tangled. And it was all good, though. We took good care of her. Did a little drums on stream today. Dude, it's crazy how the same thing always happens every time I do a drum stream. I'm kind of just practicing, kind of chilling. I start covering a couple of easy songs. Dude, that guy making requests today, perfect example. Like, he requested The Strokes. He requested very doable stuff. And then there's always that guy in chat who's like, dude, play Playing God by Polyphia. And somebody requests like technical metal. And then I'm like, oh, but I can play this technical metal song. And then I start playing technical metal. And then I throw on like Ocean's 8 Alaska, which I don't really know how to play. And I got to kind of like stop that process, dude. Just, next time I do a drum stream, we'll see. I'll just kind of play around with drum streams. It was really low key, not a lot of people there. But, request a song that's fun. Request a song that's fun, dude. Yes, I know. Dream Theater, Animals as Leaders, Polyphia. A lot of really hard music out there. Sometimes I learn a couple of their songs after, like, practicing really hard. I'm kind of just rusty on that shit. So, it is what it is, dude. I guess, in summary, technical metal music kind of, like, will kill a drum stream. It just becomes, can you play Meshuggah? Can you play Tool? Can you play Dream Theater? Can you play all the hard stuff at the same time? Like, it's all good, though. We had an all right stream. I'm definitely sounding pretty warmed up. We're living it. We're skitting it. Yeah. So that's all there really is to talk about outside of the hard-hitting topics today. We're really just going hardcore news, maybe like not very outside of the box for people. We're hitting up China. What's going on in China? Getting the latest. What's going on in Russia? Getting the latest. Doing our homework. Then, dealing with atheists, we might improvise a little bit here. I have Jay Dyer's half-an-hour video pulled up. 10 reasons why I'm not an atheist. Or top reasons I'm not an atheist. I feel like what I'm going to do, somebody like time-stamped every single point in that video. I'm going to kind of just like glance through the timestamps, maybe like skip a couple of his arguments. Just get like, you know, maybe like the strongest 10 minutes of that video using the timestamps. If we did just kind of go through Jay Dyer's entire video, I'm sure that would be fine. Personally, you know, some of his like number stuff, I don't really find Jay Dyer's, some of the arguments that Jay Dyer leans on, I don't find incredibly convincing. Like he's talking about how the concept of 7 is abstract and like, well, how do you know that your concept of 7 is the same as mine and you're assuming it without any empirical evidence? And I kind of get what he's saying, but I really don't feel like that's the strongest. The weird, like, numbers are abstract. And then there's, like, that one-liner, like, the logical positivist. This is, like, what Southern Israelites say. The logical positivist proved that prepositions are required to prove anything, and prepositions don't exist in physical reality. Therefore, empiricism can't prove anything. You know, like, it's nice. It's kind of like if Christians were neckbeards. Like you're supposed to just say that, boom, empiricists can't prove anything because propositions don't exist in reality. I get it. It's interesting. It's thought-provoking. But I just don't feel like those are the strongest arguments against empiricism. I'm really, dude, I want to make atheists squirm, dude. I want to use counter arguments against atheism that everybody understands, that are just very, like, straight for the jugular, dude. So, I mean, maybe it would be good for me to try to hear him out again. I'm a little bit confused by some of the stuff that Jay Dyer says, so we'll see. We could, like, pop around between some videos, but I do feel like Jay Dyer, if you're trying to just frantically invoke a very powerful weapon against atheism, I feel like Jay Dyer's pretty up there. So, anyway, guys, let's go ahead and get it going with the news segment. Let's go. You're listening to the Reformed Stoic News segment. Let's go. So, we got a bunch of short clips about China to kick things off. Let's get it.
In China, we are seeing growing frustration right now among residents over very strict rules, pushing some to now speak out. In the heavily controlled country, Eunice Yoon reports from Beijing this morning.
People here in Beijing and around the country are spending so many hours doing this, waiting and getting a COVID test every few days. Many find it frustrating.
That frustration flared up at this very COVID station only days before. Someone defaced it, painting in Chinese, "Stupid effing prevention control," along with a slogan associated here with the 1989 protests at Tiananmen Square. "Give me liberty or give me death," it reads. At the station today, that sensitive phrase is gone.
The staff said that the COVID testing station was clean.
Hey, China. Sounds like China wants some democracy. Damn. Are we going to get some democracy up in China? Let's glow. Unironically.
Cleaned up within hours.
All the glow bots. It's like, in China, someone said, give me liberty or give me death. The glow bots are like, democracy time for China. Did somebody say democracy? Let's go. Oh, man. The glows, like, love that kind of talk.
The health workers told us more stations were vandalized nearby, part of a rare display of discontent despite the watchful eye of the Chinese state.
We're in a district in northeastern Beijing, and this is one of the COVID testing stations that had a Chinese character painted on it. You can see how someone has covered it up. The word translates to years.
8 stations around this neighborhood were stenciled with different Chinese characters that people came to realize spell out, "It's already been 3 years. I'm numb." Numbed by relentless controls, Beijing argues can keep COVID cases near zero, but also appear to be pushing some here to a breaking point.
And health workers told us that so far there is no news on whether anyone has been caught. Andrew?
Shepard Smith here.
Shepherd's pie here. Let's grow. I got this little theory brewing that maybe China's not great. Maybe China's underrated. Like, Joe Rogan podcast took a huge shit. Like, whoever it was on Joe Rogan's podcast, he just straight up blurted out, China's a shithole. And that's not me saying that. I don't really want to. I got enough enemies as it is, dude. I don't really need to go one way or the other. The glowies are like, come on, say a bunch of pro-China shit so we can label you a domestic terrorist. I'm not, like, pro-China, and then I'm not super anti-China because, the CCP or whatever, Chinese Communist Party, is probably watching, and they'll freaking send, like, assassins overseas, dude. So, very sensitive. The U.S. government is up your ass if you are pro-China, and then the CCP is up your ass if you're anti-China. I think China is just, neutral. I have no opinion about China at all. In fact, let's just kind of like go to the next topic, honestly, dude. I think we pretty much wrapped this up. That's insane. I used to travel in China quite often, but I don't think I'll ever step foot over there again. What's the most appropriate name for this? Scandemic, feardemic, or plandemic? Put it this way, dude. I'll throw a little bit of my opinion out there. United States is a good example of how democracy is a sham. China is a good example of, like, an other shitty government that isn't a democracy. It's like, yeah, democracy is a sham. We need totalitarianism. We need something like the CCP. Well, what the hell do you believe, Reformed Stoic? I guess every government's shitty. Well, that's kind of what the Bible says, guys. This is what I was talking to my pastor about. Like, all human forms of government fail. The Bible says as much. I'm in Judges right now in the Old Testament. First they have judges, and then that fails. And then they have kings, and then the kings fail. Everybody fails, baby. I watched Excalibur last night, by the way. Honestly, dude, sometimes I think that movie's kind of boring. It's, like, really long. It's I like the idea of Excalibur, but in play, it's kind of like, this movie's kind of boring, dude. Whoa, wrinkles, you're spilling stuff. Anyway. Chief expert for the UN, Tamaya Obokata, a Japanese specialist in transnational organized crime and modern slavery, yikes, issued a report last week further accusing the Chinese Communist Party of enslaving members of the Uyghur, Kazakh, and other minorities in East Turkestan, and used similar practices against the people of Tibet. The special rapporteur regards it as reasonable to conclude that forced labor among Uyghur, Kazakh, and other ethnic minorities in sectors such as agriculture and manufacturing has been occurring in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China. Tomoya Obokata report, August 16th, 2022. All right, let's not make too much out of this. Let's keep on moving. Extreme weather in China leads to drought and wildfires. You guys, we covered droughts like a week ago. There's droughts. There's a big drought going on in Lake Mead. Hoover Dam's looking at issues in Vegas. Europe's facing droughts. Guess who's coming to the party? China's got droughts. What's up with these worldwide droughts, dude? I was under the impression that we had, like, weather controlling technology. They're not causing droughts. Are they? Is somebody with, like, some sort of a big laser intrepid Jesuit cannon, like, causing droughts? Somebody with, like, a big Rockefeller Jesuit cannon, like, causing droughts? I hope not. Francis, get the drought cannon. Hey, Pope Francis, get the drought cannon. That should be the next meme. Instead of, what is it? Fritz, get the Flammenwaffen. Pope Francis, get the drought cannon. Why is there no sound, dude? What the hell is this? Is this some kind of a sick joke? There's no sound? What happened? Why is there no sound, dude? Okay. Is that loud? About 1,500 people have been evacuated and 5,000 personnel deployed to battle the blazes and assist with rescue efforts. Well, I mean, in China, 1,500 people is not that much. Everything's bigger in China, dude. But that still is bad news, though. Alrighty then. Good character is of utmost importance. Admit your shortcomings and refrain from lying. Character is more important than skill. By the way, this NBC Peacock, I'm trying to remember, what is the name of, is it Quetzalcoatl? Is Quetzalcoatl the name of the peacock in the Yazidi religion? I'm a little rusty on this stuff. The Yazidi people, who are highly oppressed in the Middle East by Muslims, they have some sort of like a Luciferian religion where the Lucifer character is like idolized, and it's a peacock. Yeah, I'm a little bit rusty on what its name is, but I've heard that this like NBC peacock is supposed to be symbolic of that. Peacock is low-key Luciferian symbolism. Let's go. Melik Toss. Thank you, Rick. Yeah, I definitely knew that at one point. I had this like book called the Anunnaki Bible, and it had like all these different mud tablets in it, and it had the tablets of Melik Toss in there as well. I bet if they keep burning ever-increasing amounts of coal, it will get better. Hot temperatures happen, drought happens, it's weather. All right, let's go ahead and move on from this. We got a couple of things for China today. Here we go. Here's something that's maybe substantial. CNBC, China President Xi Jinping has created real structural problems, says Longview's Duardic McNeil.
We're all trying to figure out the state of the Chinese economy, and I think more importantly, trying to figure out whatever problems they may be having, are they coming our way?
Well, Andrew, good morning to you. Look, I think this has been one heck of a summer for Xi Jinping. The economic problems continue to mount. We've seen all sorts of things that they've tried, including 2 rate cuts, and we've seen about $2.5 trillion of special purpose bonds sent to try and get infrastructure going. That hasn't worked. And I think largely, Andrew, this is a story about most people in China believing that pandemic control still supersedes economic growth and development. And until the government sends a clear sign about what they're prepared to do to ease some of the pandemic pressure, I think we're going to continue to see a sluggish economy. So I'm not optimistic that what we've seen in terms of monetary policy will do the trick. I think credit is plenty cheap. It's just sentiment and demand is sluggish. So I'm not optimistic that we're going to see anything change politically or economically before we get to the 20th Party Congress. So I think a lot of people are in a wait and see mode.
That's what I was going to ask. Is this an issue of timing? Are you of the view that after the Party Congress, all of a sudden, President Xi says, okay, I'm changing tact? Is that the conventional wisdom at this point?
I wouldn't say it's the conventional wisdom. I do think that there's some real structural problems that Xi himself has created through some of his policy proposals that he's pushed. I think things will become clearer. Let me be clear. I think things will become clearer after the party Congress. I'm not sure that they'll get any better after the party Congress.
Do you think that this policy makes him more popular or less popular? Meaning, if he were to lift some of the COVID restrictions and the like now, would that increase his popularity or would that diminish his popularity?
Well, I certainly think it will help a lot of businesses and a lot of Chinese people who suffered under zero COVID. But I think popularity is one of those things that we have to be concerned about it. She does not. But I think, yes, I assume it would increase his popularity. But popularity, as you know, does not equal power for Xi. Xi is pretty all powerful, regardless of how popular he may be in China.
Before we go, just a little bit of speculation. Post-party Congress, so we're talking about, call it Christmas at this point. What are the other things you think he may or may not do when it comes to businesses, both Chinese and otherwise? Are there big things you think that are in the offing?
I think that what we're likely to see, Andrew, is more of Xi trying to regain control of Chinese markets and push China as a place to attract, and that I think that's been lagging in a way that has hurt China. And I think Xi wants to signal that they're open for business. I'm not sure, particularly given the report that we just heard from Eunice Yoon, that people will accept that or buy that. But I think you'll see more of an effort to say we're open for business.
Okay, so a perspective I heard from a very popular channel revolving China. Maybe you've heard of this guy. I can't quite remember his name. He's a white dude who lived in China for like 10 years or 14 years or something. He makes a bunch of videos about China. It's his opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. I watched his video yesterday where he's suggesting that a lot of people are saying that China is on the verge of a collapse or China is starting to collapse. His hot take was that they're not collapsing, and the reason they're not collapsing is because they don't have freedom of the press. And he was very graphically depicting that they have no freedom, emphasizing that, you know, it's corrupt and the media doesn't let people be in the know. However, I found it a very rhetorical way of basically saying that if China was a democracy, it would be collapsing right now. It's kind of funny how you look at it. He's like, well, they're not collapsing because they don't have any freedom and no, like it's corrupt and nobody's allowed to speak and you'll be imprisoned if you speak against the leader, yada, yada, yada. It's like, okay, so what you're saying is if they did have like American freedoms, their country would be collapsing. So basically, because they're not a democracy, they're not collapsing. Like when you say it like that, it's kind of like, so it would be better if they were collapsing? Like, isn't it like good to not collapse? I'm not trying to shill for I'm not trying to shill for China. I'm just saying it's kind of funny when you look at it that way. Yeah, I don't know, dude. I have a friend. He didn't say this to me. I have a friend who we have the same friend, and my friend said that our friend visited China, and when he came back, he was like, dude, that's like the way. Like the way they run shit in China is basically how it should be. That's just some guy who I probably don't agree with. But I guess not everybody hates the way China's run is a good way to say it. Not everybody out there hates China. Like it's a very Western pro-democracy view. But, you know, you could easily like live in China and then be like, oh shit, I really don't want to live here. I believe that the Chinese Communist Party will be overthrown and that long-term China will eclipse the United States. They're all for deconstruction and collapse. Yeah, it's to this point where like every country is like a dumpster fire, and it's like which country is gonna like be less of a dumpster fire so they can overshadow all these other dumpster fire countries. It's crazy, brah. Right on the point, Mr. McNeil. China has the capacity to rate cut while U.S. is entering recession with high rate inflation. Sounds like that was a pro-China opinion. let's see. Try to get cozy here. Chief expert for the UN, Tomoya Obokata, a Japanese specialist. Oh wait, isn't this what I read earlier? Yeah, that's what I read earlier, dude. Copy pasta. Can you make a video explaining how beginners can make huge profit within a short period of time? Cringe. Chinese government prioritize human lives over the economy. Here we go. Let's pro-China it. I'm intrigued by the pro-China opinion. You know, ever since Joe Rogan just absolutely like smeared China, I was blown away. It's like, dude, this is a huge podcast, and your guest is just gonna blurt out that China's a shithole. Like, so ever since then, I've kind of thought, is China like maybe kind of based, and there's just like so much anti-China propaganda all over the West that they desperately want you to hate it. I mean, South Park's got anti-China propaganda. Now I realize, no, it's not based, but I don't know, dude. An enemy of my country is my friend? That's not a good thing to say, is it? Moving on. No, I don't necessarily think that. Chinese government prioritize human lives over the economy. The right to live is a human right Chinese people care about, which is why there are so few COVID deaths versus the Western countries. Wish the report would discuss this more versus just labeling zero COVID as some kind of evil policy. Madmen like madmen. Kind calls friend. The question is, what world do you live in? Recent polls by Harvard showed Chinese people have 90% plus approval rate for the government, while U.S. has 17% approval for Congress. Yikes. I am sure you can do the basic math. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on China, guys. I just know that people that, like, I don't really necessarily take their opinions for word are really, really, really hard on China. Okay. China is quietly boosting its firepower. Now, I've had people complain about this news source in the past. Let's be adults here. Maybe she doesn't have like the best enthusiasm. Maybe her accent is not what your ears favor, but let's give her a shot, boyos. Let's go.
And there's one world power that's closely watching this battle, China. The Communist Party has studied the fall of the Soviet Union extensively, took lessons from the fall of the USSR to secure its grip on power at home. And now Beijing is carefully studying Russia's offensive because when China decides to invade Taiwan, the lessons from Ukraine might come in handy. In fact, China is applying these learnings already. Let me tell you how. What is the most obvious takeaway from the war in Ukraine? That no modern-day war can end swiftly. Russian forces were overconfident. They believed they could swiftly capture Kiev. It did not happen. Ukraine's forces were able to defend their capital. Western weapons supplies boosted Ukraine's firepower, and this forced the Russian troops to retreat to their strongholds. What has China learned from this? That it's going to need a lot more firepower to invade Taiwan. So Beijing now wants to build more warships. A new report has some details on this plan. It says the Communist Party has recently given new orders. They have restarted the construction of guided missile destroyers. What's a guided missile destroyer? It's basically a warship. It is equipped to launch guided missiles. Now these are weapons that can dictate their own path. They can chase targets and strike them without the need for constant human interference. China is said to be building 5 missile destroyers for its navy. Some pictures have come out. These are from the Dalian shipyard in northern China. These are the warships under construction. Why does China need more destroyers? To create a blue water navy, a fighting force on the high seas that can operate almost anywhere in the world. China wants to compete with the US military. It wants the ability to challenge the US in any theater of conflict. Dominating the high seas is a big part of that plan. And for that, China needs a massive navy first. By 2031, it plans to add at least 5 aircraft carriers, over 60 cruisers and destroyers, a range of logistical vessels, and strategic bombers. With this firepower, China will dominate the Indo-Pacific, or it hopes to. This would make a potential invasion of Taiwan much easier. How close is China to doing this? Let's look at some numbers. China has the world's largest navy. It has 300,000 active personnel, 79 submarines, 2 aircraft carriers, 41 destroyers, and more than 100 small boats and ships. So Beijing is quite close to its goal. And it's conducting military activities around Taiwan every day. Today, Taiwan detected 5 Chinese ships and 20 aircraft. We've been bringing you these numbers almost every day. Today, we sat down to crunch them. And what we found is mind-boggling. How many times were Chinese aircraft detected near Taiwan this month? 735 times. What about warships? At least 140 times. What is China trying to prove with all of this? It is demonstrating how quickly it can reach Taiwan. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen is concerned.
Recently, China's military exercises in areas surrounding Taiwan have posed significant threats to the status quo across the Taiwan Straits and throughout the region. Countries in the region and global democratic partners have expressed serious concerns over China's actions.
An escalation cannot be ruled out. When China announces these drills, they were in fact limited to 6 zones. But now the PLA's activities have been detected in at least 7 zones around Taiwan. Let me show you another map. The Chinese military has surrounded Taiwan from all sides. And just for context, the last major drills around Taiwan happened in the 1990s. Chinese military activities then were limited to at least 3 zones. And during those drills in the 1990s, the PLA remained close to the mainland. But now the picture looks different. Now the Chinese forces have come dangerously close to Taiwan. Beijing is amassing more firepower and accelerating defense acquisitions. This is a clear signal of intent. China may not start a war immediately, but it's definitely preparing for one. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news.
China's getting ready. Let's go. It was the 3rd time in this series that Australia had failed to score any points in the opening quarter. What is this guy on about? Whoa, dude. Dude, get it together in this comments. Okay. White girl, Asian. Wow. Well, it looks like this comment section's not going to be of much use. He who rules the seas rules the world. Once again, gravitas, while telling the truth here and there, is utterly lying in so many other points. 1. China can take Taiwan even now, but it is not necessarily learning lessons from the Ukrainian conflict as much as it is from the Falklands War of the early 80s between Argentina and Great Britain. The biggest threat and focus has always been the U.S. and supporting allies. Maybe Indians and their Navy are also in their calculations and planning. 2. The reason Kiev has not been taken fully is that Russians are concentrating their full might at that direction and aiming to secure the eastern end to protect Russian-speaking Ukrainians that took refuge over there against the neo-Nazi Ukrainian army and population that has been oppressing and shelling them since 2014, which you, as a leftist, will never cover. And at that area, Russians are doing wonderfully. Interesting. All right, well, we got through the section on China pretty quick. We just got this little article here, back to CNBC. Man, we get a lot of information from CNBC. I guess you could say we're informed. Let's go. Rising prices and hot weather in China, which has led to power rationing in some parts of the country, will affect economic growth, said Mary Nicola of Pinebridge Investments. Policymakers in China need to be more aggressive in supporting the economy before markets will be convinced that growth will improve. She said, thus far, the government has cut interest rates and taken targeted steps to support the property sector. China's policymakers should act more decisively, says portfolio manager. Policymakers in China have to be more aggressive in supporting the economy before markets can be convinced that growth will improve, according to one portfolio manager. Mary Nicola of Pinebridge Investments said rising prices and scorching heat in China, which led to power rationing in some parts of the country, will affect economic growth. We thought, especially after the lockdown in Shanghai, that the worst would be behind us, she told CNBC's Street Signs Asia on Tuesday. But potentially, with the concerns about inflation, with concerns about the heat wave trickling in, it could mean that the policymakers will have to act a little bit more decisively and increase some of the stimulus, she said. Policymakers are going to have to act a bit more responsively, more decisively in terms of something a little bit more than what we've seen so far to mitigate some of that growth pressure, man. Let's get it. All right, we're at the bottom here. Thus far, the government has cut interest rates and taken targeted steps to support the property sector. That's all positive, but in our view, there needs to be something more aggressive for the market to feel a little bit more comforted that growth is going to pick up in China, Nicola said. She said China's growth hasn't been as strong as expected despite the steps taken by authorities, and more needs to be done. The key thing here is, as growth slows, that policymakers are going to have to act a bit more responsively, more decisively in terms of something a little bit more than what we've seen so far to mitigate some of that growth pressure, she said. Investment banks, including Goldman Sachs and Nomura, cut China's growth targets this year as the economy was impacted by COVID measures. In late July, the country's top leaders said they would focus on stabilizing prices and employment in the second half of the year, downplaying the importance of the GDP target of about 5.5%. China's GDP grew 0.4% in the second quarter this year compared with a year ago. Let's go! Charlie Chan's number one son. She was hard, up for some curry. BlackRock in China, let's get it. Okay. Let's hear from a special somebody. Ex-CIA director predicts what's next in China-Ukraine war. Ex-CIA, let's go. He was the best source in the world. He was the very best source that you ever heard from. Let's hear some truth from an American. Let's go. All right.
Ukraine has
CNN hype. CIA? CNN? I'm loving these sources.
Has now seen 6 months of conflict, violence, alleged war crimes brought upon it. Here are just some of those key moments in the last 6 months to remind you of, because there has been so much. A warning, you may find some of these images disturbing. 6 months ago today, on February 24th, Vladimir Putin launched his invasion of Ukraine, ordering thousands of Russian troops to go in to cross the border. On March 9th, Russian forces bombed a maternity and children's hospital in Mariupol, killing 3 people, including a child. Remember these devastating images. President Zelensky called the attack at the time proof of genocide. A week later, a Russian airstrike hit a theater, also in Mariupol, that was being used as a shelter for civilians. And they wanted to make sure that the Russians knew it was a shelter, because painted on the grounds outside of the building in giant Russian letters was the word children. Hundreds were killed in that attack. On the 1st of April, the world saw the first horrifying images of the massacre in Bucha, evidence of Russian forces executing several men, their bodies found lying in the streets. A mass grave with an untold number of people buried there. The atrocities sparked demands of war crimes investigations and much harsher sanctions on Russia. And while the number of civilian casualties is still unknown, the United Nations now estimates more than 10 million people have been forced to flee Ukraine since the war began. All of this in just the last 6 months. Joining me right now to discuss more is William Taylor. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, and retired General David Petraeus, who, of course, the former CIA director and former head of U.S. Central Command. Thank you so much for being here on this day. I want to break this into 3 parts, if I could: Ukraine, Russia, and the NATO alliance. General, where is Ukraine 6 months in, and what are you watching for in the next 6 months?
Well, Ukraine, I think, has seized this strategic initiative. Yes, they have lost, they've gone from 5% of Russian control of their territory to 20%. But of course, they won the Battle of Kyiv. Putin failed to topple President Zelensky. Putin's also watching nearly 4 million of his best and brightest leave his country. He's made NATO great again. He's done more for Ukrainian nationalism than any Ukrainian nationalist figure. So now Ukraine is poised, supported by the arsenals of democracy, the US and the other NATO countries, to perhaps go on the offensive, to launch a counteroffensive in the south in particular, having again used these precision munitions to Russian ammo dumps, fuel depots, headquarters, and even airfields in Crimea, seeming to set conditions for what might follow. But the question is, can they now translate all of these arms and ammunition and support from the West into meaningful tactical and then operational victories in the South? And that remains to be seen in the weeks and months that lie ahead.
Absolutely. And Ambassador, on Russia, where is Russia 6 months in? What do you see changing there in the next 6 months with regard to, I mean, Fred Pleitgen laid out, you can almost think that there isn't a war going on if you're in Russia right now.
Well, you're right, Kate. And President Putin would like there to be no mention of the war. In fact, as you can go to jail for calling it a war in Russia. So he's concerned. He's got problems there. He's got economic problems. His big problem is one of soldiers. His military has been beaten up, as General Petraeus said, and as your reporter said. In the beginning of this war, the Russian military got really hammered. And they're now in a grinding battle back and forth, losing tens of thousands of his troops. So President Putin has a problem on soldiers. So he's looking for, Libyans or Syrians or North Koreans. He's looking at the private sector. He's looking at Wagner Group. He's got a problem. And what that means is he is in a strain to mobilize. That if he mobilizes, then he's got a political problem at home, Kate. So he's got economic problems, he's got military problems, and he's probably got political problems.
And General, talk to me more about NATO in this equation. It has stayed united, and it is getting bigger. That is one thing that we have seen in the 6 months of war. Does that sustain for another half a year?
Well, certainly we hope so, and I tend to think so. There's great leadership at NATO. The Secretary General has stayed on longer. You see two very strategically important countries with very fine forces, albeit small ones, Finland and Sweden, wanting to join NATO after years of being neutral. And you see the alliance pulling together and helping Ukraine in just about every way that they possibly can. So in truth, no one has done more again to make NATO great again than Vladimir Putin. He's the greatest gift to NATO since the end of the Cold War.
Ambassador, let me play actually something that the NATO Secretary General has said about what winter is going to mean for Ukraine's allies. Listen to this.
Winter is coming, and winter is going to be hard, and NATO allies across Europe and North America are paying a price. Caused by the sanctions, caused by, of course, the brutal war of Russia against Ukraine, increasing energy prices, inflation. But at the same time, we know that the price we have to pay if we don't support Ukraine can be much higher.
Ambassador, what does a cold, long winter mean for continued support for Ukraine from Europe when we can be looking at serious energy shortages?
Okay, this winter is going to be key. If the Europeans can get through this winter, the Ukrainians can get through this winter. I mean, they got millions of Ukrainians going back home to destroyed homes in the middle of a tough winter. Ukraine has a tough winter, and they will be short of energy as well. That said, if the Europeans can get through this winter, then demand for Russian oil and gas will have peaked and will be on the way down. And that's going to have a big effect on President Putin's ability to pursue this war. So this winter is going to be tough. It's going to take leadership. It's going to take leadership from NATO. It's going to take leadership from the European Union and European nations. It's going to take leadership here in the United States as well. And if we can hang on, if we can maintain the support for Ukraine, maintain we're convinced that the Russians can be beaten, that they can lose, and the Ukrainians can win. That will get us through this next winter.
And General, also just the next phase on the battlefield, of course, is also this winter phase. What does that mean in the battlefield?
Well, first, I think there's the late summer and fall phase, Kate, and that's where we should be looking to see, can Ukraine take back the province, the oblast, Kherson, Kherson in the south, and also all of the area of Kherson that is west of the Dnipro River. And Ukraine has been taking out the bridges that connect Russian troops that are west of the river with their logistics support and so forth on the east of the river. They've done it quite impressively and seeming to set up the counteroffensive that I discussed earlier to be isolating that part of the battlefield so that they can take that back and then see if they can press on further into the south. That's going to be key. Then you'll see, I think, the onset of winter. It's going to be very tough. Depends obviously on how really difficult this winter is. In the southern area, it may not be as difficult as certainly it is in the north and the northeast. I think the fighting will continue, however. And the Ukrainians, of course, are also showing something here that is crucially important. And that is that they are generating forces. They're recruiting, training, equipping, organizing, and then employing additional Ukrainian forces much more effectively and efficiently and impressively than are the Russians. As the ambassador mentioned, the Russians are struggling just to find replacements, much less to find organized, equipped, and trained units.
It has been a remarkable thing to watch on so many levels. General, thank you so much. Ambassador, thank you so much as well. I really appreciate you being here today.
CNN, CIA. At one point, that guy was like, we all just got to hold on. I just imagined, dude, I have the weirdest visions. Like, we're on some, big jet, and it's, driven by spooks, and we're on there, with a bunch of, hold on! Everybody hold on! The CIA is going to take care of it all! Hold on, boys! Just believe everything that the news says! Hold on! We're doing a barrel roll! Trust the CIA! You guys have to trust the CIA. when Aladdin's like, do you trust me? Do you trust me? Do you trust our government? You have to trust the government. Hold on! I don't know what I'm saying, dude. All right. All this war stuff, man, I don't really know, dude. We're kind of just blowing through it. We're just brushing up on these topics. I'm kind of looking forward to, hearing from Smear Dyer on atheists. We're just kind of touching up on what's been going on in the world. A lot of people... A lot of scary stuff, man. Can we all just get along? No more lockdowns. No more wars. No more brother wars. Brother, my brother. Tell me, what are we fighting for? Tell me, how do we end this war? That's from a special little movie called the Pokemon 2000 movie. Actually, no. That was from Mewtwo versus Mew. Okay. Happy Independence Day to our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. We stand with you in honoring your fallen heroes and celebrating the strength and culture of your beautiful country. Glory to Ukraine. Very cool dudes. Have to say, while I respect the lady's intelligence, she's awesome on many levels. I thought it would take him 3 days to take over all of Ukraine. It's been 6 months, and he barely took a small part of the east and south, and even there, Ukraine from time to time takes some sections back. Ukraine deserves most of the credit. They have proven themselves not just brave and tenacious, but also skilled, capable. The West deserves the rest of the credit. Putin actually managed to unite us. You chat on a scale of 1 to 10, how similar is what Russia's doing right now to Hitler and the Nazis? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much is Putin literally Hitler? Invading Ukraine, and then maybe if they fail to stop him in Ukraine, he's going to continue expanding or something. Are we dealing with literally Hitler right now? Let's see. Hence the slog. 1 out of 10. Still too much Hitler for my taste. Let's go. Happy Independence Day. Okay, apparently, yeah, it's Ukrainian Independence Day. Thank you, U.S. people, for supporting Ukraine. Yeah, we're going to learn about how Biden announces another $3 billion. hey, you know what? It's not like we're going through a recession over here. Cool, dude. Yeah, let's just give them all our money, bro. Our money is your money. Americans warned to leave Ukraine due to threats of Russian attacks. Here we go. ABC.
Tonight, President Zelensky issuing an urgent warning to Ukrainians that especially brutal strikes could be coming from Russia in the coming hours. They're now in the early morning hours in Ukraine. Their Independence Day has begun. And tonight, the U.S. State Department urging Americans to leave Ukraine, sharing declassified intelligence with Ukraine. Our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, back in Kyiv for us tonight.
Українці, українки. Tonight, President Zelensky issuing an ominous new warning to his people. Ми маємо усвідомити, saying Russia may be planning, quote, hideous provocations and brutal strikes as Ukraine prepares to celebrate Independence Day. And tonight, the US again urging Americans to leave Ukraine amid that threat of intensified Russian attacks. State Department sources saying declassified intelligence shared with the Ukrainians shows the Kremlin may be preparing to launch strikes on highly populated areas. Ukraine's banning large gatherings during the event. ABC's Britt Clennett asking President Zelensky about the threat.
What's your reason for urging people not to gather tomorrow? Is it because Kyiv is under threat?
Ми говоримо, що ці дні можуть бути провокативними з боку Російської Федерації.
Amid these concerns over what Russia may do next, the United Nations holding an emergency meeting on the volatile situation at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Ukraine saying Russian strikes damaged infrastructure and transformers, briefly cutting off power at Europe's largest nuclear plant. The Ukrainians also claiming Russians are shelling the plant's nearby ash pits, where nuclear waste is stored, raising clouds of toxic radioactive dust, stoking ongoing fears of a potential nuclear disaster.
And so let's bring in Ian Pannell tonight reporting from Kyiv. And Ian, I want to get right back to the U.S. State Department again, urging Americans to leave Ukraine, saying it shared a declassified intelligence with Ukraine, suggesting that Russia might in fact be planning these strikes on Independence Day, which of course is in the hours ahead. President Zelensky, in your report there, obviously clearly very concerned about the real possibility of this.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, Independence Day has just begun and this country is braced. But Zelensky also doubling down tonight. He's saying that they won't relent until they retake back parts of the country occupied by Russia, not just in the last 6 months, but for years, even Crimea. Forget any peace deal for now. This war looks set to drag on for a long time. David?
Ian Pannell in Kyiv for us. Ian, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel.
Gotta get Americans out of there. Sounds like shit's gonna go down, possibly. When I saw the title of this video, I thought to myself, isn't this 6 months old? Deja vu, anybody? If you don't stand up to the bully, you'll just keep getting bullied. Let's get it. You mean they haven't already? I feel like this is a bit late and beyond obvious. All evil must be eradicated from the earth. You know, a lot of times, sure sounds good on paper, doesn't it? You sure get like a bunch of nutty, loony cultists marching behind people who say that all evil must be eradicated from this earth, said the Marxists, said the radical leftists, said the libertarians, said the atheists, said, you know, like anybody can say that and it sounds profound. Actually, it doesn't sound profound, but to low IQ knuckle draggers who are in cults. What was the name of that song? Dumb people are in cults? Or who did I say was in cults? I can't remember who I said was in cults in that song. I don't know. I think it was dumb people, low IQ people. I don't know. Somebody's in cults. Traitors, idiots. I'm freezing up. I'm panicking. I'm blowing it. All right. I'm speechless. Why haven't they left months ago? Everybody knows Putin is nuts and won't stop at anything to bring down Ukraine. Normies. Normies end up in cults. That's what it was. Yeah, normies. You know Putin is going to show out on Ukraine's Independence Day. He is not here for that, so I'm glad they're going to keep it low-key this year. All right. Well, it's pretty dark stuff. Let's move on. What does this guy have to say? He looks kind of like a Ninja Turtle. CBS, of course. Biden announces nearly $3 billion more to aid in Ukraine. 6 months since Russian invasion.
So for more on this ongoing war in Ukraine, let's bring in CBS News foreign policy and national security contributor, H.R. McMaster. He also was security advisor in the Trump administration from 2017 to 2018. Thank you so much for joining us. I kind of want to start with the news that the U.S. has pledged it's $3 billion in additional military aid for Ukraine. And as I understand it, you know, some of this aid, some of these weapons, they won't see the battlefront for years, which suggests a years-long commitment to this battle. In the meantime, you know, we're learning that European nations, for the first time, have not pledged any additional military aid in July to Ukraine. And when I heard that, I thought, is the U.S. going to be left financing a sort of a dispute or war that doesn't seem to have an end in sight?
Well, Anne-Marie, it is a long war already, and it's going to be even longer. And I think this was quite apparent from the very beginning. But now, apparently, we're just starting to come to grips with this, that this is going to be a long war. And therefore, we have to provide the weapons to the Ukrainians so that they can defend themselves along a 1,850-mile front. I mean, the straight line distance really from almost New York to Houston is what they're defending across right now. And why this is in our interest is Ukraine is not.
He kind of looks like the guy from The Shield. What was that guy called? Main character in The Shield, dude.
Not some like just backwater country. It's really in the heart of Europe. And we know from Putin's behavior across his 22 years in power now, right, beginning in 2000, that there is no such thing as an off-ramp for Putin. It's just a chance for him to look for another on-ramp. So if Putin is going to be defeated, and if Russian leadership at some point can be convinced to rejoin the community of civilized nations, Ukraine has to be able to win this fight. And winning, of course, is defending the territory they're retaining. Russia right now occupies about 20% of Ukrainian territory, but it's going to require taking back some of that territory. And according with, you know, from what President Zelensky has said his objectives are.
But if there's no off-ramp for Vladimir Putin, does that mean also there's no off-ramp for the U.S. in its continued, you know, giving of military aid?
It's like an ongoing proxy war.
Right.
Well, it's not a proxy war, Errol. I mean, Ukraine got invaded, right?
Triggered. Yeah, right. Somebody got triggered when he said it was a proxy war. Triggered.
In 2014. And Russia has been subverting that country since at least 2003 when they poisoned a presidential candidate and permanently disfigured him. So it's not a proxy war. This is Ukrainians fighting to maintain their freedom. They're facing a choice right now. Or do you want to be a colony of Russia, or do you want to be an independent nation that's part of Europe? And that's why they've demonstrated such tremendous will. So we're not fighting this war for exclusively our interests. We're fighting it to support a country that has been brutally invaded and victimized by a dictator in the Kremlin.
But I guess my point is that the U.S. is supporting Ukraine. President Zelensky himself, though, has issues internally with his security service, with potential treason, people being investigated for treason, more than 1,200 people. Ivan Bakanov, the head of Ukraine's domestic security service, he dismissed recently, raising concerns in the U.S. that all of these funds, all of this money to fight back Russia may in fact be mishandled. How confident are you that Ukraine itself is secure?
Well, Errol, this is a big point in Russia's information war against us, right? So Russia has done a very good job because, you know, the Soviet Union was very good at this as well, at political subversion to attack our will. And there's been some good work on this recently. There's a foreign policy article out recently about how Russia has really energized its disinformation machine, especially the cyber-enabled information warfare machine, to raise these doubts, right, within Ukraine, but across Europe and in the United States. Of course, there is a.
All right, I feel like there's at least one thing I can chime in on here, because overall, I don't have that many opinions on these wars, man. I find maybe it's not really one of my specialties. Once a war happened a long time ago, then I feel like I have a lot to say about it, but it's like a little bit overwhelming, man. Like, my life has been crazy the last 2 years. COVID's been crazy. Wars are popping off. Tensions rising with China. Wait, what the hell did this guy just say?
Enabled information warfare machine.
Oh, yeah, disinformation. See, one of the opinions that I developed over the years is that every country has interests, every regime utilizes propaganda, and once the United States starts talking like, oh, Russia is utilizing its disinformation campaign, it's pumping everybody full of lies, just this idea that the United States is the arbiter of truth, and, you know, like every position that's within our country's interests is the objective truth, or any of our allies' interests is the objective truth, and then everybody else is filling the world with disinformation. Like, every country has its interests, and I'm not necessarily saying that I agree with Russia. I'm definitely not saying I agree with Russia, but just this idea that, you know, the United States is like the objective arbiter of truth and other people lie, it's just a little bit misleading.
Machine to raise these doubts, right, within Ukraine, but across Europe and in the United States. Of course, there is a fifth column within Ukraine. It's been cultivated by Russia since Putin came into power, at least in the year 2000. There are fifth column activities all through Europe. Germany, of course, has been significantly subverted by Russia with, you know, the buying off of elites like Gerhard Schroeder, the former chancellor, who mortgaged Germany's energy security and gave Russia coercive power over Germany's economy. So this is just part of the fight, right? There's a battle, a physical battleground, Errol, but there's also this battleground of perception and information that is aimed at subverting will.
You know, we know there's a lot of propaganda out there, and it's difficult to, on both sides, it's difficult to sort of determine what the truth is. But I find this very, very interesting. Vladimir Putin's approval rating is apparently quite high in Russia. I can understand how you can lie about the invasion and don't call it a war, but you can't lie about the bodies coming back. And at this point, I would think every Russian city and town has seen a body of a young man come back. But still, Vladimir Putin seems to have the ability to control the narrative and control his approval ratings.
Yeah. Well, Anne-Marie, I don't think you can believe it all. Now, you know, I'm not an expert at this, and I talk to people who are experts. Some
Are we back, guys? Mic check, mic check, mic check. I'm going to have to see if we lost the frickin' VOD. I think that's usually the technique, guys. Okay, we're still in this, right? Are we still in this? Yeah, we're still in this. Okay. Sorry, I don't really know what that was about, but we're back. Okay, let's finish it up.
I think this is really, the two clocks are ticking, right? There's a clock that is our will, and this is relevant to the question that Errol raised. You know, will we maintain the West's will, such as the West exists, right? And among NATO and European Union countries and the Ukrainians themselves, obviously. And how is Russia's will going to be affected? Is it going to be affected by the casualties, as you mentioned, by the economic conditions, by the fact that Putin has turned Russia into a pariah state? I mean, there are restrictions now on Russian tourists, for example, in Europe. And I think really what we ought to be trying to do maybe more aggressively is poke some more holes in Russia's information walls to help the Russian people get access to different information. Putin's approval ratings are highest among those who get all of their information through state media. So if there are ways to get through that firewall, I think that could be helpful in terms of maybe helping the Russians understand how he's not acting in their interests. The other interesting thing, Anne-Marie, is that he hasn't been able to mobilize, right? So there's some real checks on his behavior. They're trying to raise these kind of volunteer battalions in towns and small cities, but they can't mobilize because I think he's afraid people won't do it. People won't join the armed forces, and that would elicit some significant opposition.
Well, by the way, to your point, and we're just running out of time, but to your point and Anne-Marie's point, there was that Russian paratrooper in the Washington Post earlier this week that spoke exactly to that. Went on a mission thinking it was one thing, found out it was completely different, and he wants everyone to know there's
Look at how this lined up over his face. That's kind of funny.
Misinformation in Russia. H.R. McMaster, always great to chat with you. We should have a regular fact check. Really appreciate your insight today.
Great to be with you.
All right, our refusal to take the vax will turn out to be the best decision of our lives. That's right, dude. Yeah, I have a feeling. I have interesting opinions about that. Love to share 'em, but it's a touchy subject. I think the lipstick's doing something to people. Let's go. Sounds like a lot of hush puppy money has gone to Ukraine. They're our buddies, though. He sent a generation's worth of programs and assistance for actual Americans to a foreign, non-NATO nation in only 2 years. Un-effing believable. Sounds like corn pop, because I'm riding with Biden. Man, Biden's planning on doing student loan forgiveness programs. Let's go. We might have to cover that on Friday, baby. I think we're going to be riding with Biden on Friday, going over student loans. I'm just disappointed I have to share this smugness with Drake. He was thinking of getting it at one point. It has stopped him. If it stopped him from driving Uber. Oh, man. He was thinking about getting it. Can you imagine? All right, guys. I don't know if this is actually a pretty long article. I was definitely not going to go over the entire thing. Just a couple of little this and that from here. And then we're going to watch Funny Cats while I go pee. And then we're going to start tearing atheists to shreds in the nicest way possible, of course. Christian stream hype. Ukraine calls for more weapons and sanctions on Russia. UN says nearly 18 million people need aid. U.S. State Department issued a warning over the threat of increased Russian strikes on Ukraine during the week of its Independence Day on August 24th, urging remaining Americans in Ukraine to leave the country. Kiev is bracing itself for fresh Russian attacks. That its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has warned may be particularly nasty. The UN continued to sound the alarm over the situation in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest, demanding a demilitarization of the area and warning that the world is facing a moment of maximum danger. A worker at the plant died of his injuries due to Russian shelling near the facility, Ukraine's state energy company said. Meanwhile, the volume of grain leaving Ukraine's ports for export has increased to more than 700,000 metric tons. Just one little random snidbit, and then we're going to move on. Russia's war in Ukraine has left about 17.7 million people in serious need of humanitarian aid, according to United Nations estimates. The UN also warned that the crisis will affect more people as the harsh winter season approaches. The United Nations estimates that humanitarian organizations have scaled up operations in order to reach 11.7 million people since Russia's war in Ukraine began 6 months ago. Well, you know, guys, at the end of the day, this is a pretty serious topic. I'm all for people getting aid. You know, this is tricky math here. It's like, okay, well, we're giving money to these people. Do people in America need help? Absolutely, always. But as far as the things that get my goat, as far as the things that upset me, you know, some people who are beat up and need some aid, getting some money. I don't know, man. I'm trying to like not be the bad guy so many times anymore. So this war shit, this war stuff that's happening right now, it's a little bit tricky for me, man. Like when it's on, it's on. I'm kind of a history guy. I'm a philosophy guy, theology. Does anybody want to talk about something that happened 1,000 years ago? Let's go! All right. Let's do funny walrus? Can we get a freaking funny walrus in here, dude? Funny walrus. And let's not get in trouble. Freya the Walrus, let's go. Let's learn about Freya the Walrus, dude, while I go to the bathroom.
There is a portly new pinniped in the waters off Oslo this summer. Freya the Walrus has slowly made her way around several ports of call in the Baltic Sea. Her favorite pastimes, sunbathing, seafood, and crushing seafaring vessels. Her face has launched 1,000 tweets and even some fan art. And we must now beg forgiveness from John, George, Ringo, and especially the walrus, Paul, as we bring you this tribute to Freya from our Scandinavian wildlife correspondent, Malcolm Brabant.
Climbing on a Nordic vessel, waiting for the sun. Man, you've been a naughty girl. You made the boat go down. You aren't a deckhand. Call out the frogman. Freya the walrus. Goo-goo-goo-goo. Apologies to the Beatles for crucifying their psychedelic hit, but here, in the Baltic, there's a new walrus in town, and she's causing mayhem in her quest to find the perfect pleasure cruiser.
You can see she's a big lady, and that she's curious, and she's not afraid of people. She loves to rest.
Nadia Gianni from the Norwegian Directorate of Fisheries is part of a team.
Let's go. Freya did nothing wrong. Let's see here. I mean, he could have just switched jobs. Have to credit Drake with years of top quality entertainment. Truly, I say to you, our lives would hold far less value if this insufferable autist were to have not entered our lives. Yeah, it's been an interesting timeline. We could discuss the schism and bogomalism. Let's go. Well, it's atheist time. Maybe some people have caught wind about a special somebody who's a very outspoken atheist who's been saying some not so friendly things about me. I don't have that much to say about that. I will say this. I think it's becoming more and more clear. I think this situation with a special somebody who shall not be named that I'm in, I think it's making it more clear why I'm like really trying to get away from the black pill community. I just kind of feel like it's a little unfair how people are starting to like tell my life story. Make no mistake about it, guys. Me losing friends and becoming isolated and ultimately spending time alone and not being social, I never really tried to say it's because I was like so ugly, you know? It's more like I started to study and go inward, and I really think it's more of like curse of the high IQ, honestly. I mean, I'm not trying to like pat myself on the back, but people telling my story like, oh yeah, Reformed Stoic was a huge loser and he was super ugly and he could never get laid. And that's why, like, he spends all his time alone. It's like, actually, it's more because, like, I started getting into theology. All those people in Kodiak that tried to cancel me, they're all atheists, dude. And, you know, Mr. Black Pill Channel, who's on my case now, he's an atheist. And it's getting to a point where it's just like, you know, I just don't really break bread with people who are atheists, bro. Like, it makes it so much easier, rather than me, like, engaging in everybody's bait, rather than me like acknowledging everybody who flings shit at me. It's like, I just don't really break bread with atheists, dude. Like, at this point, it doesn't work out. Anybody in my life who is an atheist usually ends up like stabbing me in the back and starting a smear campaign. And when people don't have morals, it plays to their advantage. This guy has this like nihilistic black pill worldview where on one hand, he's a victim and everybody's cruel. Normies are so cruel. He has videos where, like, you can never be friends with normies. You can never trust normies. He's kind of like playing the victim on one hand, but now all of a sudden he's saying things like, oh, you know, I'm a true cell, and, well, he's a different kind of incel. He has, like, a different status within the black pill community because he's not a true cell like me. I mean, what the hell is that, dude? So, like, you don't get any women, and you don't have any friends, and you're isolated, but you're cool because you're not a true cell. And you ask me, dude, the guy in question has shown his true colors. If you don't know who I'm talking about, whatever. Just this whole act, like he's a poor, innocent black pillar and the world is so cruel to him. It's like, well, dude, it kind of seems like you're kind of a normie. Everything he said in his video was lies. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So on the topic of atheists, let's smear them with our buddy Jay Dyer. And I wanted to look through the timestamps here. Let's see. Transcendental argument. Divine necessity is self. I mean, we should pretty much just listen to the whole thing, dude. Sorry, guys. Let's fire it up.
Why I'm not an atheist.
I was never really tempted with atheism. Ever since I went to college and started my trek into the world of philosophy since 18, 19, I've had a lot of debates with atheists. We used to debate atheists all the time on campus. In the philosophy club, we would have constant debates. So I'm very familiar with atheist argumentation. I had a lot of atheist professors, and I even debated atheist professors when I was a sophomore. I had a public debate with my philosophy of science professor at the time. So I'm very familiar with various atheist positions. It's a position I've interacted with probably for 20 years now. So maybe 21, 22 years. So I want to be as fair as I can. I don't want to give misrepresentations. I know that there's a lot of different views that fall under atheism. I know that some people conceive of atheism as agnosticism, just simply saying that we don't know, we can't know. And then other more hardcore positions that there absolutely is no kind of higher being, nothing transcendental, etc. So I'm going to give my 10 reasons. They're not really in a specific order, just like the other top 10s, why I'm not a Catholic, why I'm not a Protestant. You can watch those videos right before this. And here we want to just kind of list the main reasons that occur to me. So if you follow a lot of my debates, if you've seen a lot of those, a lot of the interactions that we've had, a lot of the lectures, then you probably know some of these. You probably heard a lot of these, but let's try to boil it down.
I'm going to rate each argument going through. Like I said, some of his kind of stuff based on numbers and agreeing on concepts. I find some of these arguments stronger than others, so I'm going to try to chime in here. It can be a little bit cheap for me to just play Jay Dyer for half an hour. I really appreciate being able to use his content. And when Christians are super you can't show my content, give me money, and it's dude, I'm trying to use your scholarship and your brain power to defend the word of God and ultimately to protect based Christianity, dude. So I don't know, I feel like he should be cool. Christians should be cool with other Christians being hey, you got good arguments and I want to show people. So hopefully this is legit. We might skip through this. We'll see what happens.
Down to something as quick as we can for a top 10. So the first one would be the transcendental argument. I think the transcendental argument is the strongest argument for God's existence, and it's because it shows the necessity of God's existence in a logical framework. It can be written out as a syllogism. We've given many examples of that syllogism. If you listen to the debate that I did with Dr. Malpass, you'll notice that towards the end of the debate, I listed a syllogism there that could work. But basically, everything that we engage in this world relies on everything that we use in this world, such as mathematics, logic, abstract conceptual entities. They all presume what are called transcendental categories. Right? They rely on things that are not known or proven through mere sense experience. So we could think about things like spatio-temporal relations. So we could think about things like the past. We could think about things like objects having identity over time. We could think about things like the transcendental unity of a self, right? That there is a self-existing something. I know that atheists won't say that there's a soul, but there's something that's having this experience of the world that is a unified conscious experience, right? Whatever terms you want to use to call that. These are, in philosophy, titled things like transcendentals. They're things that are assumed for the possibility of reason or logic at all. And if you were to deny any one of these, you would actually undercut and negate the possibility of logic or philosophy or reasoning or meaning or knowledge whatsoever. And so that's why they're so strong and so powerful, is that they're necessary for a worldview at all. Now, a person can theoretically deny these things and continue to have a worldview, pragmatically speaking, but at that point, they're just being inconsistent. And so when we bundle all of these things together, these transcendental categories that are necessary, again, for cognition, for meaning, for objectivity, et cetera, for consciousness, for knowledge, for ethics, then what we get is a bundle that doesn't stand on its own. How do we justify those things? Do we just say that they are? Well, they actually do need to be grounded. They need to be made coherent, and they need to be strung together, so to speak, on a you could think of it like a golden string of pearls that strings together all these transcendental things, and that is the mind of God himself. The mind of God is the basis, the ground for these things. And although it may sound kind of counterintuitive, it is, you can logically show this. Now, we've done this in many, many talks. I'll put some of those talks down below for a longer presentation. But essentially, any worldview that doesn't have that as its grounding, any worldview that tries to do materialism as its basic metaphysical or physicalist assumption, ends up in relativism. It ends up in self-contradiction at a very fundamental level. So I would say that that the transcendental argument itself is the first reason that I would believe in God's existence, because it shows that reasoning itself presupposes the Christian God.
I'm just gonna be honest. I find that very like confusing. And if you brought that out to atheists, they'd just be like, what? And like, they wouldn't really know how to refute it. But it's just a little bit much, dude. I guess I'm tempted to say it's too philosophical. I wouldn't count this as like one of the stronger arguments to use against atheists. You really want to use language that they just can grasp, so they can just really grasp the weight of the smear. I feel like the transcendental argument's a bit out there. Maybe it works. It's just, I don't know. It's a little bit out there for me.
The second reason that I would not be an atheist is that we utilize all these things like meaning, like logic, like math, and we think about those abstract conceptual things, but there's also other things like love, like beauty, aesthetics, things that relate to the world like telos or causality. Those things in themselves can't be empirically demonstrated. They're actually assumed. And so they're kind of like the transcendental categories that I mentioned before, things like causality and telos would be. And I would argue that you could even include perhaps aesthetics in that category, right? That it's actually impossible to live your life as if the good is purely subjective. And that's what I think is amazing here, is that even such basic philosophical assumptions like whether there's an external world ultimately can't be justified unless you have a world grounded in an external being like the mind of God and not in our own subjective experience. And so essentially, another one of these key assumptions would be that your senses match up to an external world, right? We all kind of assume that in our dialogue, in our discourse, in our daily living. But can we actually empirically verify that claim? No, you can't. It has to be assumed, and it can't be empirically verified. Now, how do we prove that if we can't empirically verify it? Well, the first point that I would say is that rank empiricism, and most atheists, not everybody, but most atheists are naive rank empiricists. They believe that we only know what's true from sense data and from sense experience. The problem with this, of course, is that you cannot prove that proposition, that belief itself, from sense experience, and so therefore it's at a fundamental level, it's very contradictory. So much so that it can't even get off the ground. So I would say if you look at things like, again, beauty relates to form and symmetry. And if you took something like a Mandelbrot set as an example, a Mandelbrot set shows that this mathematical structure, this set based on set theory, is not something that is invented by the mind of man. And now not all, but a lot of atheists will say that mathematics is a social construct. It's a human invention. It's not something that's actually being discovered like you were, going out and discovering, Antarctica or something like this, right? But in fact, a lot of mathematicians will speak of mathematics as a landscape of discovery, that when somebody discovers something like a Mandelbrot set, they're not inventing it, they're actually discovering something, right? And that shows that these are not products of our mind, but they exist in some kind of realm beyond our minds. Ultimately, that's the mind of God. And I have an essay where I argue about this kind of stuff called Numbers Prove God, where I flesh that out more. So if you want to go deeper into that.
Yeah, you see, and I'm playing devil's advocate here. It's like, well, Stoic, aren't you trying to like show people arguments for God? Like, I want heavy hitters, dude. I want atheists to be obliterated. I feel like this is the science rocks tier equivalent for Christians. This is like really out there philosophical. It sounds like word salad. I probably risk sounding like a brainlet right now, but dude, I just want something quick, to the point, logical. I want to smash atheists into pieces, you guys, and I just don't feel like this is the stuff to do it. Did you know that, like, numbers are good? Like, what the fuck are you saying, dude? Like, okay, next. So far, I'm an atheist. It's like, okay, Jay Dyer, I'm an atheist, and I'm not convinced. So, moving on. This is supposed to be, like, yeah, I don't find those convincing. It just sounds like a bunch of philosophical word salad. It's like, let's get to the good arguments, please. I'm sorry, this isn't really like the point of this, but this just is not. Yeah, it sounds like word salad to 99% of the population. And if I can, like, now defend Jay Dyer, it's kind of sounded like you, like, maybe, like, Jay Dyer is really smart, okay? And if you have this, like, beautiful high IQ philosophical mind, then this might really speak to your soul. And, you know, me just trying to dumb it down, we all agree on the things that are beautiful, and I'm sure there's all kinds of ways atheists can try to attack this. It's like, well, you know, that's just evolution. We select for traits that are beneficial to our survival. I mean, this is a really tough debate to have. I don't think it's tough because atheists are smart, but I think this modern paradigm we're in has set things up for this hard, materialist, nihilist position to be very easy to defend. And this is very inspiring to people. This is going to be very inspiring to a lot of intellectual Christians, but we're looking for weapons against atheists, and I just feel like this misses the mark. Moving on.
I'll leave that link in the pinned comment below. So there's also a great lecture by Dr. Jason Lisle on Mandelbrot sets. I'll include that in the link as well. Again, this is just a top 10. I can't prove every single proposition and every single argument in a top 10 video. So the backing for these claims, because I know there's going to be atheists in the.
I feel like he should have ended with these. Like, he started with this because he feels like this is some of the strongest arguments, and I feel like he should have ended with these
comments saying you didn't prove nothing. You just stated your position of transcendental argument. It's just stating the position. It's not an argument. I'll include the argumentation in the pinned comment. The next argument I would say is that nihilism is the end result of atheism. Now, not every atheist might.
Yeah, so now it's going to go to nihilism is bad, which it is. It's devastating. I'm probably interested in reading Father Seraphim's book at some point. What is it called? He's probably going to mention it. Seraphim's book. I think it's just called Nihilism. Nihilism is bad and is the logical conclusion of atheism. And then it gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, just because nihilism is bad and destructive, does that necessitate that atheism is wrong? I think this is a hard debate. Like, I think atheists are usually Dunning-Kruger, but they have a very strong position, and they very lazily defend it. I feel like I smear atheists all the time. I'm just saying, man, like, Jay Dyer kind of like likes to hear himself talk with this very like philosophical jargon, and I don't feel like this is going to do the job. Anyway, let's hear him out on nihilism, though.
Want to go in this direction, but I think if you read Father Seraphim Rose's great philosophical presuppositional critique of revolutionary thought and atheism, atheism is just one of the flavors of revolutionary thought. I'm speaking of modern atheism since the Enlightenment. And it leads to nihilism. I think he proves that case, that there's a kind of a dark logic that nihilism takes you down as you come to what's called in philosophy epistemological self-consciousness. And all that means is just that you are going to, over time, become more and more consistent with your governing presuppositions. So if your governing presupposition is atheism and materialism, you're going to become more and more consistent with that and end up in nihilism. We can actually see the logic of this as it works out in Western thought. For example, if we go back to the Enlightenment, to the scientific revolution, you have the rise of rationalism, you have the rise of these universal Enlightenment ideals, and then within a few centuries, this degenerates into postmodernism, and then into just sort of will to power Nietzscheanism, and then to just full-on nihilism. And there have been quite a few nihilist philosophers. Some of the Russian Revolutionaries were openly nihilistic. V.I. Lenin was pretty nihilistic in his philosophy. So there is a real progression to that dark left-hand path, you could say, of being more consistent with one's nihilistic assumptions. And so even though stage one atheism might not be nihilistic, the end result, if you're being consistent, is nihilistic, because there's not really any reason for anything. There's no reason to do X over Y. There's no reason that this is preferable to that. In effect, all actions are perfectly equalized. And if all actions are perfectly equalized, it doesn't matter.
I think a very effective and simple argument is regarding morals. If there's no God, see, where does my system of morals come from? It comes from God. God gave his system of morals in the Bible. If there's no God, there's no morals. People can try to agree upon morals, but people are going to disagree. And ultimately, you can point at that, like, you know, it seems that the radical left, modern atheists have overwhelmingly embraced moral relativism, which is self-refuting. This is really basic stuff, moral relativism, but I think it's basic because it's a good argument. And ultimately, it's like, okay, if you really do believe that we live in the atheistic, hard material, nihilist world, which right now we're kind of searching for a very strong argument against. Like ultimately, you could say, okay, I don't believe in a God, and as a result, I don't believe in objective morals. It's like, okay, fair enough. Let's all like get naked and start throwing our shit on each other and burn everything to the ground, because nothing matters. And it's like, it's a strong viewpoint in as far as like, if people are sophisticated and we're going to live in the best society, a God would be ideal for that because it would create objective morals. But I guess the point is, as an atheist, you really could say, no, I don't believe in God, therefore I don't believe in objective morals. You're right, so let's rip off our shirts and start throwing our shit at each other. It's like, I mean, I do have arguments for why that's not what we should do, but just the morals argument, you know, without God, there's no objective morals, that's great, but an atheist could weasel out of that by saying, no, I don't believe in objective morals. So the journey for the hammer of smear that smashes atheists continues. Let's go.
What happens? It just is. And as Hume said, you can't get an ought from an is. You can't get a standard, an objective, any kind of value judgment from a mere is, right? Something, just the fact that something is the case does not lead to the conclusion that something ought to be, or you should do this, or you ought to do that. That's the domain of ethics. And atheism and materialism cannot provide any objective standard of ethics. Now, you can say things like, well, but you got to be nice to people, you shouldn't harm people, but why? Why? The natural world is full of predator-prey relations.
Yep, so my commentary on morals was pretty perfectly timed there, because now there he goes. Like, why would you have ethics without God?
Why not harm people? Why not crush everyone that I want? And
so as an atheist, the only way to get past that, the only way to continue the discussion is to say, I do not believe in objective morals. And like, there's not any reason we shouldn't just be rolling around in the street, cranking it in front of everybody, throwing our shit at each other. So that's how an atheist has to win. You know what I'm saying? It's like a move in an RPG game that doesn't kill you, like a move that can't kill you, but it like takes your health down to like 1%. An atheist, to survive that, has to say, we might as well be rolling around in our own shit, throwing piss at each other. It's like, okay, you're still in the game, but you think we should live in piss world.
Take my own harem of everyone else's wives and start my own cult and make me the Übermensch, right? Why not? There's no reason why you shouldn't do that. There's no reason for anything. Events just are. And so ultimately, again, the problem here is that on this position, you have a situation where even your own consciousness is just a series of chemical reactions. It's not a real... There's nothing underlying these phenomenal experiences. There's nothing underlying these chemical reactions. There's no actual meaning to them. They just are. And I think that that's severely problematic. The next point I would make is not ultimately a proof of the position as a whole, but as I've gotten older, I think that the proof against atheism, but it's an analysis that I do think is worthy of mentioning. Again, it's not strictly a logical argument against the position, because you could use this argument against a lot of different views. But I've seen this more and more as I've gotten older, especially after many years of 20 years of looking at the world of atheism and watching the new atheists and those guys, 10 years ago or so coming to popularity, is that atheism is really part of a larger social engineering tool. Atheism is not just a bunch of people who are seeking through altruistic reasons to find the truth and to be logical and to be rational and to be scientific. In fact, atheism is promoted by very powerful, wealthy people. Again, not just because of people nobly wanting to see what's true and dispel superstitions, but actually to take society in a larger sense in a certain direction.
Yeah, the idea that science is just innocently trying to find the best information, that is absolutely false. Like Jay Dyer just said, there is an agenda. They are artificially pushing this worldview, and I think this is some of the strongest stuff. Your typical mouth breather, normie atheist just thinks, well, scientists are just trying to get to the bottom of it. They're all just trying to find the truth, and that's where they don't seem to be able to follow the money, and they can't follow the history. And you take a look at where the money's coming from, who's funding the studies, who's rising to the top in academia. There's an agenda there. It's not just an innocent, objective, unbiased search for the truth. It is a well-coordinated and funded attack on the Christian worldview. Just my opinion, but I think that's the strongest we've got so far.
And if you study the history of revolutionary movements, which I did extensively in college and grad school, you'll learn about worldviews and ideologies.
Ironically, the Enlightenment thinkers began the reasoning process from an epistemic standpoint that is self-referencing, tending to circularity or infinite regress. I am that I am is better than cog. I think, therefore I am. Interesting. Descartes.
Is being weaponized. I mean, the CIA has done this for many years. I've written 2 books that deal with this very topic. My master's degree was on the way that the CIA utilizes ideologies in specifically in the Cold War. And so when you study that for a long time, you'll notice that ideologies, even things like atheism, can be psychological warfare tools. And I didn't know that as a young guy. Even when I started debating atheists, I had no idea that something like psychological warfare and social engineering could be that sophisticated. And of course, it absolutely is. And I would say that when you look at the modern day atheists, a lot of them actually are being propped up by the system, by the establishment. And that's why they all sort of tout the system establishment line. They don't really deviate from anything that's establishment. They're all just kind of establishment mouthpieces. And I think that that's very telling, that if they were really seeking out for altruistic reasons the truth, the noble scientist kind of guy who's willing to risk it all for the truth, if that was really the case, then why do they line up across the board on all of the kind of normie takes on everything, whether it's Tyson, Bill Nye, or Michael Shermer, or whoever? It's all just the same type of normie stuff. And I think that that's very suspicious and suspect. And they're just establishment pop mouthpieces, and that's a big, I think, blow to the validity of these pop atheists who are still sort of out there promoting this worldview. So it's a very naive approach, right? It's a naive approach in terms of understanding the world, as if atheism and the atheist thinkers and writers aren't being supported by the system for the purpose of taking society in a direction, and ultimately you can watch my globalism book series to see what direction they want to go in. And after reading 40 plus books and lecturing on them from the top elite of the last century, you can absolutely see that atheism is a tool for social engineering. We just saw this with the H.G. Wells book that we did, God the Invisible King. The next I would say is that pragmatically speaking, atheists always want to appeal to pragmatic arguments. So, oh, it doesn't work. Christianity doesn't work. It leads to oppression. It leads to superstition. It's this, that. Do atheist societies actually work? I don't think so. I mean, again, the problem here is that when we use the word work assumes that we have some sort of gradation, some sort of benchmark, some sort of value judgment by which we can determine and assess.
I've always said that atheists not really being philosophically consistent in their position they hop back and forth between being a Gnostic and between being an atheist, and they don't seem to understand it. It's like they have a split personality, and as soon as you start doing a good job attacking the idea that God isn't real, then they just hop over and move the goalpost to God is mean. Well, what about all the slavery in the Bible, and God killed all the babies, and he told Abraham to sacrifice his son. And I think it's very important to point that out. It's like, well, are you saying that God isn't real or that God is mean? Are you a Gnostic or an atheist?
So whether things do or do not work, right? So that's, once again, to say that atheist societies work, that's going to be conditioned on your presuppositions themselves. You're going to read what works based on your presuppositions, right? So, for example, if I think that it's good to depopulate, and I killed off most, Georgia Guidestones, let's say we kill off most of the world, or something like this, down to 500 million. If I believe that is good, then I think that works. If I think that works, I believe it's good, right? So the problem with pragmatism is that it on the one hand assumes a objective standard, while at the same time typically denying objective standards. And that's incoherent. That's a contradiction. That's being illogical. It's a violation of logic. So the point being is that if we want to be pragmatic and we want to say, well, does it work? Well, if you are anti-human, I guess it does work, right? I mean, if you think that it's good to have some sort of entity that enacts mass death or something like this, a communist state, a technocratic state that's going to depopulate on a mass scale, then it does work, right? Now, I know that there could be atheists who say, well, we don't want that. We want, the Charter of Human Rights or something like this. But again, the reason here, the argument I'm making here is that there is no reason to prefer one or the other, right? If you try to say that, well, we should protect the life of XYZ and we should not protect the life of ABC, there's no real objective reason to delineate between why we should or should not, because shoulds and should nots are the domain of ethics. And in this worldview, there's absolutely no coherent basis for objective ethics. Now, I know that there are atheist philosophers who think that they can give a basis for some kind of objective ethics or secular ethics or something like this, but they can't. Because there's no such thing, again, as objective standards. There's no such thing as metaphysics in this position, because most modern atheism, again, maybe you can find a guy here or there, but most modern atheism comes out of the tradition of David Hume, the classic skeptic, the denial of metaphysics and the denial of these sort of absolute concrete metaphysical principles. And when you do that, you kind of box yourself in, and you're limited in the options of where you can go in terms of things like ethics. And so I would say that atheism actually doesn't work, and it doesn't produce a, quote, healthy society. Because what we conceive of as healthy and what we conceive of as working is actually going to be based on our presuppositions. And if our presuppositions are false or incorrect, then they're going to lead to incorrect conclusions. And so if, for example, we look at, say, radical anarchism as an atheist position, or if we look at radical socialism or communism or dictatorship, fascism, whatever, as perhaps then really all you have is a dialectic at work. There's no reason to prefer or to think that one is better than the other. Now, you might like the individual anarcho position better because maybe it affords you the opportunity to engage in more personal pleasures or something like that. But on what basis does that mean that's actually true, right? So because you prefer or you enjoy more pleasures within a libertarian anarcho system of atheism as opposed to a collectivist system of atheism, it's just completely arbitrary and ad hoc. There's actually not a reason for one or the other. And to say, well, it's just what I want, that's called being arbitrary. That's called being ad hoc. That's not actually giving a reason. That's just being subjective. So once again, it always boils, if you look at the debate with JF, you look at the debate with any of the other atheists I've had, it always boils back down to subjectivism. And even if you bring in things like universally preferred behavior or something like that, that's just as arbitrary. It's just as ad hoc. And it's just as subjective and not able to be grounded in objective principles. Because again, atheism is grounded in a movement against objective metaphysical principles. 99% of the time. The next argument I would say is that ultimately then atheism is anti-human. Now, again, if you're an atheist, there's a tension in a lot of atheism between, on the one hand, wanting to be, we're secular humanists, we believe in the good of man and man rising up and the power of human reason, and at the same time,
this is ultimately an appeal to emotion. It's just like, bottom line is God real or is God not real? So, even if atheism is like bad for humans, it's like, okay, but is it the truth or not? So for me, it's just like, this doesn't really get to the bottom line of it. But let's keep going.
Man is conceived of as this buffoon, this entity that's a kind of cancer on Mother Earth that, most humans, because they don't have, IQ 150 or above, we got to get rid of all of them. And so there's this dialectical tension between humanism, so-called, and on the other hand, anti-humanism, right? And when you get to the root of the humanist movement, you'll see that most of them, they're not humanists. They want most people to die. I mean, look at the history of the depopulation movement. Look at the Rockefeller Foundation. Look at the communist regimes, all the murder, all this stuff. When you try to instantiate these utopian kind of systems, they lead to disaster because this world is not utopian. And it leads to disaster because atheism itself is a false philosophy. It doesn't work. It actually is not pragmatic, although it claims to be pragmatic. So I would say that when you have a system where there's no image of God, where man's not made in the image of God, then all human rights are worthless and meaningless. There's not really any human rights because you're not damaging, you're not being held to an objective standard because all standards are relative. All right. So atheism is the dehumanization of man, and the global elite actually understand that, and that's why they foster atheism, to demoralize and to brutalize you so that you are then more malleable for the social engineering, right? From soy wars, from video games, from all the replacement stuff that you get from the system to make you feel like you're a male, to give you synthetic masculinity, sports, all this nonsense, right? Those are all your replacement masculine idols, right? Which really ultimately you would get in being grounded in real philosophy, being grounded in real metaphysics, real epistemology, ultimately in theology, right? So all of this stuff is a replacement for that. Next, I would say that atheism is materialistic ultimately. Most of the time, again, 99%. You could have an atheist who believes, oh, well, we just live in a dream simulation. Oh, we just live in some kind of like matrix. We live in, it's all Maya, it's all solipsism, right? And my argument here is that ultimately atheism can't, as we mentioned earlier, this idea of the senses matching up to the external world. Do you actually know? And can you prove that there's an external world? I'm speaking logically here, right? So these are dilemmas that, again, atheist philosophers have raised, like David Hume. And the inability to prove these kinds of claims logically, all the way up to William Van Orman Quine and his 2 dogmas of empiricism, where he restates the arguments of Hume. A lot of these kinds of things you can't actually prove empirically. And this is why atheistic philosophy is so bankrupt, is that it actually doesn't understand the limitations that it puts itself in to actually undermine logic itself, to undermine philosophy. And so if all that exists is material, matter, then not only can you not know that, because that's actually a metaphysical claim, it's a universal claim, first of all, you can't actually ultimately know that the external world is not just a projection of your own psyche. And some have gone in that direction. Some people actually do believe that. And I would say that, so again,
theology rocks. Philosophy rocks, dude. This is like I said, this is like the science rocks tier arguments. Did you know that, like, we can't even know if the outside world actually exists? It's like, yeah, man, it's just kind of like word salady. It really makes you think. It definitely makes you think, dude. But, guys, I don't think this is an easy debate. I do not think this is an easy debate. I basically see atheists like morons who have a very powerful weapon. They are defaulting to a very well-crafted worldview that has ultimately been crafted by our elite. The elite have given them this destruction weapon that they ultimately don't really know how to defend or use properly. Yeah, I think the strongest argument, well, I'll save that for the end. Let's just keep this going.
And if you know the history of Western philosophers, when they debate this kind of topic, they come to that conclusion because they say things like, well, if we're just basing our worldview on our sense data, all we have is impressions, right? Like solidity, senses of smell, sight, right? Those are just sort of things that impress themselves upon us. We don't actually know what's out there in the external world itself, right? At what Kant called the Ding an sich. We only know the phenomenal experiences that we have. So it's entirely possible, if you think about a dream state, right, that all of those exterior sense impressions that are being pressed upon us are just mental phantasms. Right? And if they're just mental phantasms, then we don't actually know if there's an external world, and you can't empirically demonstrate that. This is the kind of question that Descartes raises, right? Now, I don't believe that as a Christian. I believe obviously there's an external world. What I'm saying is that atheistic philosophy, because it basically takes what we would say is true of the mind of God, and it tries to smush that into the mind of man, and ultimately in atheism, man tries to take on the role of God. I mean, it's man attempting to, in a Promethean sense, be God, and it still believes in God. It still has the attributes and necessity for God, but it all places that within the mind of finite, meaningless man. Man, what is man in this system? He's just a drop of dust, a bag of human cells, a bag of cells, basically chemical reactions in an infinite, vast universe of meaninglessness, doing meaningless things, bubbling over, right? Your words, this is just chemical reactions. There's no meaning here. And then he turns back to dust. It's meaningless. And yet he spends his time, his days fighting theism, fighting the things that he thinks are suppressing. Why do you even care about people being suppressed, right? Why do you care about superstition? Why do you care about being noble, fighting for what's true, being rational, being logical? It's a giant meaningless universe. So those things are all meaningless. I remember being at a debate one time.
Doesn't matter though, maybe it is a giant meaningless universe. That's the thing, dude. I'm really trying to play devil's advocate, and it's like, I want something that just undeniably smashes atheism, and I just don't think it works like that, guys. This is all leading up to me giving you my best take at the end of this video. We're going to build up to it.
Again, I always bring this up because it's a great example where the atheist, after the debate, came over to us and was talking, and he said, I don't get your argument. He said, I think that really ultimately the real root of all this, he said, is that you are afraid to embrace the fact that the universe is ultimately meaningless. I said, do you really believe that? He said, yeah, absolutely. I said, so would that mean that you believe your own life is meaningless? And he said, absolutely. And I'm not afraid to say that. He said, I have the courage to own up to admitting that my life is meaningless.
And then it gets to a point where that's uninspiring. It's like, I think I was created in the image of God. I think we're living in a giant test. I think that God has intricately interwoven a number of challenges and obstacles in our life for like a very specific purpose of lessons. And you think that just everything came from order out of chaos. So what that amounts to is, you can see from that, well, your Christian worldview is very clearly much more inspiring and meaningful and overall superior, and it will lead for you to be a more interesting and it's more inspiring, it's more full of life, it leads to a better, more constructive worldview, but still, maybe it's just a cope that ends up being super inspiring and it's not the reality. I'm setting this up for God mode, you guys. I don't like saying God mode. Like, I'm setting this up for nightmare mode. I want nightmare mode, and I want to still smash the atheist at the end. I'm not saying I'm smarter than Jay Dyer. I'm just really trying to be like, let's just crank this up to nightmare mode and still defeat atheists. And I'm ready, dude. 7 more minutes. And I'm going to tell you guys what I think is the best argument.
And I said, well, if your life is meaningless, that would mean that this day today is meaningless, right? He said, yeah, sure. It's all meaningless. I said, if this day today that we're experiencing right now is meaningless, does that also mean that the conversation, the words that you're saying to me are meaningless? And he sat there for a minute and he said, I'm tempted to bite the bullet here, but you're just playing word games. Well, of course, you have to bite the bullet here, right? If you believe that that's all meaningless, then you're part of this meaningless thing and your arguments are meaningless. And if your arguments are meaningless, then I have done my job as an apologist to show.
Word salad, baby. Does he have the bomb? Does Jay Dyer have the bomb? I want to send atheists to this video and be like, well, go watch Jay Dyer's 10 Reasons I'm Not an Atheist. I feel like atheists will roll their eyes at just about this entire thing.
Show the incoherence.
I mean, I feel like the best points was that nihilism leads to just like a meaningless world, but that still doesn't really prove that God is real. And this is rough, guys. Get ready, because I'm about to like give you my best work.
And the foolishness of this position. And so once again, that's an example of the transcendental argument where somebody's utilizing something that's completely incoherent on their position, but it actually makes sense. If God exists and the world is as we believe in Christianity, then there are metaphysical principles. There are ethical absolutes. There is the possibility of having knowledge and certitude. There is regularity in nature because of divine providence. But on that system, there's not, and it's all meaningless. So I would say that atheism, as we said, assumes all of these standards. This is my 9th reason. And this includes things like morals and absolutes, right? It assumes the things that are necessary to refute Christianity that only make sense within a theistic or Christian worldview to try to argue against it. And so it's essentially sitting on the limb like a cartoon character as it saws the limb off, right? Let me give an example of this. If you think about Wittgenstein, Wittgenstein says all words are word games. Language is just word games. It's just tricking people. It's just this kind of stuff. He says that ultimately, if you just deconstruct all language, is meaningless. But he just wrote a book with 100, 200 pages admitting words are meaningless. Using words that are to convince you that words are...
He's driving this home like this is just like a game changer, game ender, and I don't see it, dude.
Meaningless. So he's conveying meaning, an objectively true thing, he thinks, utilizing meaninglessness, and ultimately saying his book is that's a basic presuppositional critique. It's nonsense. It's foolishness. All atheism ends in this very same bucket trash bin of foolishness and philosophical incoherence at a fundamental level. Lastly, I would say that if you look at atheism, for all of its claims of being rational, being scientific, it relies on outstanding, outlandish miracles. It relies on things like knowing that there was the past. It relies on claims about aeons ago, what happened 11 million, what the monkey was doing literally 11 million years ago in Africa. Right, Jacques Attali talks about this. Totally not observed. No one has observed this. You don't observe the transitions between these so-called species. There's no observations of things. They're just postulated, and they're usually argued for on the basis of authority, appeals to authority. Right. So you can't prove the self. The self is assumed in every argument that the atheist uses to argue against Christianity. You can't prove meaning. And yet, as we saw, the atheist argues that the world, the universe ultimately is meaningless as he utilizes words to argue against words and meaning. You can't know or prove the past. These are, again, transcendental categories. But yet these things are magically believed to exist and to have occurred. And ultimately, the whole world coming out of nothing, the Big Bang, right? Magical superstition. All the Big Bang is a original miracle for secular atheists. And it's ludicrous. All mass was compacted into a tiny infinitesimal dot and then it exploded. That's total nonsense. Total baloney. Something came from nothing. That's absurd. Life came, consciousness came from nothing. Those are called miracles, secular miracles. And ultimately, through the transcendental argument, we consistently deconstruct and show that these positions are nonsense and are absurd. And they can't. That's why you get people like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, "Don't do philosophy. Stay away from that realm. I don't even mess with it. It's all nonsense." Oh yeah, exactly, because it shows the absurdity of this worldview. So thank you for watching this top 10. That's my 10 reasons. If you
All right. Ooh, Jay, why do I have to clean up after your mess, bro? I'm going to pray really quick. Heavenly Father, I pray that you will give me a concise use of language right now so I can do my absolute best to defend your existence, the existence of your word, and the reality of the Christian world. Thank you for your guidance. I'm sorry for my wretchedness, and I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. I'll start by saying that we, as Christians at this point, I would like to invoke Plato's allegory of the cave and then Descartes' demon. So Descartes says, how can we know that we are not being deceived by a demon? And I would take that question in context to this society. How can we not know that this society is acting as Descartes' demon and deceiving us? And I think that's right in line with Plato's Republic, the allegory of the cave. I believe that the default position in the atheist New Atlantis that we currently live in is to be an atheist. You turn on television, South Park, Comedy Central, stand-up, you're going to see atheist rhetoric. You're going to see Joe Rogan making fun of Noah's Ark. You're going to see South Park where Jesus is wrestling with Satan. You go to your public school and your geology teacher, your biology teacher is going to make fun of the Bible. We are living in a very carefully constructed weapon against the Christian view. So I believe that to become a Christian, you leave the cave. When you leave the cave, you see the reality that the philosopher kings projecting these images upon the wall that people see that they see as reality, these people are in fact misleading us. We live in a society that is deliberately misleading its people. It's serving as a noble lie, an opiate of the masses. Now on top of that, I would say that atheists have made the mistake of dishonoring their mother and father. They have chosen not to trust their ancestors. They have spoken on thousands of years of their ancestors as if they are naive, as if they're idiots. The atheist worldview suggests that before World War II, before the post-World War II United States, everyone was just a bunch of knuckle draggers. The Western spirit, it seems to be commonplace to write off the Middle Ages. I have a feeling the Middle Ages were very underrated. Then you start getting to the Enlightenment and people start speaking like we're already becoming atheists. That's definitely not true. People like Euler read the Bible to his children. Isaac Newton was a theologian. Leibniz, one of the co-founders of calculus. Leibniz and Isaac Newton were both co-founders of calculus. Both of them believed in the Bible. Both of them believed in God. You started seeing this more Enlightenment-infused Christianity, and then you, of course, had the Freemasons, who I think are some of the earliest roots. Illuminati, Freemasons, fraternal orders, these are some of the earliest roots of this atheist sentiment. And then you look at the Royal Society, who wanted to put this emphasis on the scientific method. And then you have Francis Bacon in his New Atlantis, where he envisioned a time when people would say, I do not believe in God because I believe in science. This worldview that science is against God is a strategy. And in order to enact out this strategy, you create a system where its foundational teachings are all against the Bible, where they have falsified evidence, many times failing to do so. If you look at the Piltdown Man, which Teilhard de Chardin, I believed, a Jesuit, was involved in, where they're attempting to posit some sort of a proof of a missing link between man and ape. Well, it was shown to be a pig's tooth. Things like the Big Bang, like Jay talked about. The idea that we have evidence for the Big Bang. These are like foundational miracles, like Jay said, given for their falsified worldview, where ultimately a lot of it is propped up on carbon dating, which is actually only one method of dating. There are actually hundreds of other methods to date something, and they all produce different results than carbon dating. So they're using carbon dating like this infallible black magic divination that is supposed to accurately date anything. And there's a number of different arguments for why we should believe that carbon dating is misled, such as the flood. Like all of the carbon levels and layers were tampered with and destroyed and maneuvered and manipulated during the Great Flood. That's just one of the arguments. So, in summary, I would say that our government is in fact in conspiracy against its people because they are deliberately trying to remove our faith. And the mistake that atheists have made is you do not have a respect for your Western ancestors who overwhelmingly embraced the Christian God for well over 1,000 years. Now, in this very small fraction of time, let's go ahead and say post-World War II till now. And what are the fruits of the atheist world? What are the fruits of this post-World War II atheist world? Well, we can say it's been roughly 70 years from 1950 until now, 1950 till 2020, little over 70 years. And what did the course of Western society look like since then? The development of the radio, television, media, entertainment, rock and roll, hippie movement to hair metal to 90s grunge to new metal. Do things look good now? And this is again going towards the like, well, Christianity is more inspiring and creates a more inspiring way of life. But it is time to take a look at what are the fruits of the atheist society. Well, ultimately the country is divided in half, and you know, we have this overemphasis on the importance of diversity, the importance of women. The idea that the patriarch should be in power is now gone, and we're handing society over to women. 60% of universities enrollment is women at this point. Half of women age 30 are childless. We're seeing a cease in the birth rate. We're seeing men leaving the universities. We've seen a great decline. We're starting to see the beginning of a decline in our way of life. And if you look at a society falling apart over the course of 70 years, I mean, that's under a century in the terms of history. I mean, what's the difference between the 1600s and the 1700s? 1700s versus the 1800s. 1500s versus the 1700s. I mean, what changed over the course of the 1500s from the 1700s compared to now? The kind of changes that took place between 1950 and 2020 compared to the changes between a 200-year span of 1500s to the 1700s. It's not a comparison. It's like slam dunking society into the garbage. The fruits of the atheist society is leading us towards a collapse in 70 years, which in terms of history is like slam dunking the society into the garbage. Historically, there's nothing more devastating to society than atheism. I mean, we see the fruits of the atheist worldview, and it has slam dunked Western society into the garbage in under a century. which is nothing we've ever seen in history. And that's some of the best that I got, you guys. And at the end of the day, in the world that we're living, the default worldview, if you think that this place is your friend, if you think this society is your friend, the default worldview is going to be atheism. More or less, I'd return to Plato's cave. We are born in Plato's cave. And if you think that everything is fine, you will be an atheist. It takes a critical thinker. It takes a certain level of critical thinking ability. And it takes being able to bring Descartes' question into play. How do you know you're not being misled by a demon? How do you know that this society is not misleading you? How do you know that you can trust authority figures? How do you know that you are not being misled? Normies cling to this idea of you're a conspiracy theorist, everything's a conspiracy, and ultimately Plato's cave allegory, those who left the cave and returned to tell everyone, hey everybody, hey masses, this cave is a lie. There's a whole big world out there and we're being manipulated by philosopher kings. They end up getting killed by the masses. That's cancel culture. That is the cancel culture of the left. That is this hyper political correctness. That's what it is. That's the masses being weaponized against you. And Plato outlined the allegory of the cave because he was laying down the blueprint for a system of control where it's like, hey, we'll mislead the masses, and anyone who sees through it will ultimately be eliminated by the masses. And that's what you're seeing. An artificial worldview has been created. They have fabricated evidence. Ultimately, studies do not prove things indefinitely, so an understanding between the difference of inductive versus deductive is very important. Like, oh, well, we did this study with 1,000 people and it proved this. Well, studies don't prove anything. You look at the data and then you write an essay about what the data appears to be concluding. That's a lot of my kind of just stream of consciousness. God has put us in this position where people who have trust in the system are going to default to atheism. As far as I know, atheists are still the minority, but who knows how bad things can get. And it's absolutely insufferable because, like I said, I don't think it's an easy debate. I think God has given us quite a challenge in the atheist masses. I would definitely maintain that the people who cling to the atheist worldview, you kind of just live in the... You're kind of just like a paper blowing in the wind, man. You know, you don't question Joe Rogan's stand-up. You don't question South Park. Every time South Park plays the cheesy message music at the end, you agree with the message every single time. Whatever the propaganda is in movies and television, you're what they want. You're what this system wants. They're feeding you a line, and you're taking it hook, line, and sinker. Ultimately, you're either going to believe in thousands of years of your ancestors, of your people who said, listen, son, listen, grandson, listen, great-grandson. We represent a line, a seamless line that goes all the way back to Christ. My grandfather believed in Christ. His grandfather believed in Christ. His grandfather believed in Christ. Going all the way back to people who lived when Christ lived. It was an unbroken line of handing it over to the next generation. This is reality. Jesus Christ lived. And we can trace back our lineage to people who absolutely knew that Christ lived, like who lived near the time that he walked the earth. And at some point, Rockefeller, the mercantile class, the secret societies, they artificially reached down and broke that line of succession, and you chose to believe the system over your people. You have faith in a system that I fully am convinced is predatory, malevolent, and ultimately satanic. So it's not an easy worldview. It was not my default worldview. I was a very confident atheist in high school. I was a very outspoken atheist in high school. The typical atheist that I come across these days who are in their 20s, I had all their same rhetoric when I was like 16 and 17. And then I kind of became like spiritual. I read horoscopes and was kind of like superstitious, and that led to the occult and divination. And eventually, after going on this perennial quest and kind of going to every belief other than the Bible, it's like, there's nothing left to take a look at other than the Bible. Because I've been edgy. I've tried to, like atheists who, they have an irrational hate of Christianity specifically, and then they give Muslims and everybody else a break. That's how I was inherently. And I said, if I'm going to believe in this kind of like divination and witchcraft, then why wouldn't I give the Bible a chance? And it was ultimately a Philosophy 101 course, learning the arguments for God, the basic arguments for God, when I said, I could be very mistaken. I think that I'm severely mistaken. I think that I've made a mistake. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to undo it. And I guess one of the most important points is that it's not easy. We are up quite a task, and it ultimately does take faith. I believe that the teleological argument, that is my personal favorite argument for God, and that is simply that there appears to be an intelligent design. You chase this line of evolution, like there's water, we need water to survive, and there is water. It's like, we evolved to survive off of water. Okay, well, do you think that the weather cycle evolved? I mean, would you say that the environment evolved because the way that plants need water and we need water, and there's this irrigation system of like water evaporated into the sky and then raining? I mean, plants need water to survive. So it's just chasing evolution. You have to keep chasing evolution. Well, the plants evolved to drink water and we evolved to drink water. But if you keep chasing evolution, it gets to a point where it's not logical, because ultimately they posit that life has the desire to live. Why? Why is it built within life to have the desire to survive? That would imply a design. There has to be a design somewhere. Evolution is our genetic innate desire to survive. But if we are truly order out of chaos, why would life have a desire to survive? Because it just does. Nope, nothing just does. Either there is design or there is complete unordered chaos. So, and this is not anything that atheists are going to be impressed with. I look at nature. It's beautiful. I see the way that life goes. I see the way that life unfolds and situations unfold. It's incredibly intricate. I look at history and the way that history unfolded. It's intricate. The plot is greater than any anime that there ever was. I see meaning everywhere I look. I see meaning in our history. I see meaning in our present. I see meaning in the design. I see architecture in our bodies. I see architecture in nature. I see a design in each and every animal. Elephants are good. Dogs are good. Cats, tigers, fish. I see a design. I don't see the results of just a random spurging out of a chaotic, purposeless universe. I appreciate it, JD. I kind of think that I don't. This is a stream of consciousness. This is just me going all out, telling you why I'm not an atheist. It's my best shot, boyos. And to wrap up this podcast, I want to tell you that I want to get things built up for my main channel to come back. It's going to be in October. I already told you guys I love October. I ultimately get my channel back in like a week or so, but I got 2 strikes, and I don't want to do anything on my channel till that last strike wears off. That's going to wear off in September 28th. So we're getting the main channel back at the beginning of October, and it's going to be epic. I just want you guys to picture that time. You know, it's a little bit of turmoil. It's hard for me to put a silver lining around taking that strike. It was brutal. We had a good momentum going. We still got people here. We're still doing okay. It's still worth doing the podcast over here. But I've lost my main channel a few times, and I just know that bigger's better. Having those more subs is better. There's always going to be the people who be like, dude, where did you go? And they don't look at the comments, and they don't follow the alternate channel. It's going to be better to have the main back. So just get pumped up. You know, we'll keep rocking over here. Halloween is going to be dope. We're going to have the main channel back. I'm going to keep a tight ship. We're not going to be getting strikes anymore. That was my last mistake. Ultimately, it was a strike on a video that had just been there for a very long time. But get pumped for Smeartober, guys. We're getting the main back in Smeartober. It's going to be epic. I'll probably release some sort of a video on this channel, just kind of getting everybody hyped up to just make sure that, you know, because we're building up the algorithm over here right now. But ultimately, those 2,100 subs that I grinded out on that channel, you just can't make up for it. It's better having the bigger audience. So I just want people to know, get pumped for Smeartober when the main comes back. But until then, we'll keep grinding it out. I can't do community posts. That's part of taking a strike. But I will get the community posts back in a couple of weeks. So I'm not going to move the podcast back until October. However, the ban is going to wear off in like a week or so. I'm going to have to double check when that ban wears off. Then I'll start making community posts over there again, and I'll release a video on my main channel like, hey guys, I'm going to announce on my main channel to come over here for the podcast. That will definitely help. And then I'll let them know that we'll be back over there in October. So I think I got a good little plan together. It's a little bit of an obstacle, but we're doing good, guys. Just about made it to the 2.5 hour mark. So yeah, religious topic ended up being the focus of the stream today. I dig it. I appreciate the support, guys. I guess like a grill cast tomorrow or something. Just at some point tomorrow I'll go live. Next podcast is going to be Friday. So thank you for being here, my friends. God bless you. And I will see you